as ready as I'm going to be.
Awesome. All right. So I got Chad Smith here. We're going to have a conversation about force plates. So before we dive in, Chad, can you give us a rundown of who you are, what you've been doing the last, 3 to 5, 10 years when it comes to strength and conditioning? And then we'll roll into the conversation about force plates and the value they provide, as well as the value you provide to the athletes you work with.
Yeah, man, for sure. So I'm an athletic performance or strength and conditioning coach right now for Midtown Athletic Club. I had my CSCS. Prior to that, I was a PE teacher and started the strength and conditioning program at a couple of different districts. My most recent one was at Livonia. And we did some amazing things there, man. We really put in over $100,000 in that weight room. And that gave me a big foundation and a big jumpstart the path that I took with sports science and really trying to take data and apply it in an intelligent way to help kids progress and try to keep them as fresh as we could. All that stuff kind of led me to where I am. And when I left the high school setting and went into the private setting, I got big into speed training. And I really got this kick out of monitoring fatigue and trying to figure out the best way to progress somebody based on where they were on a day-to-day basis. And that kind of led to force plates and how all that tied into speed development and all that, and strength training and when you should push kids, maybe when you should back off of them just a little bit. All that kind of led to all roads to where I am now. And I travel around. I just got back from Dawsonville, Georgia, and I manage their GPS data. We just got them some force plates down there, so I manage that data too on the back end, and literally look at everything holistically. GPS, force plates, what are they doing in the weight room, and help guide the coaches to what it is the kids need, who's feeling beat up today, who we need to back off of a little bit at practice, or maybe even in the weight room, who got 3 hours of sleep, who is not eating right. All that stuff kind of comes from our questionnaires and stuff that we do. But that's a bulk of what I do now. And actually that's my most, it's my biggest passion right now is helping people remotely based off this force plate data to help improve performance essentially.
Cool. Yeah. Force plates are kind of new. I know back in the day, right, it was kind of just, let's go in the weight room. Let's get that number to climb, whether it's the back squat, the front squat, cleans, bench, but force plates have really changed the game. How have they probably been around for? I know they've had bigger, more, technological versions, and now we've kind of shrunk them down. So because you go from facility to facility, or you can travel with them. So how long have they been around, force plates?
Oh man, I just took a force plate course from a guy, University of Kansas, Dr. Ramsey, man.
Yeah, I know Ramsey. He's a good dude.
Yeah, he's a good dude, but I feel like in his course, they said they've been around since the 1800s. So it was something crazy, right?
Yeah.
The earliest thing. So it's obviously evolved a ton. And I would say 20 years ago, it's only something you would see in the research setting, or maybe the highest of highest levels, right? Because they were so expensive, and now they've made them to a point where they're so much more affordable. Sure. And here we are today, right? So they've been around for, I want to say, over 100 years easily.
Sure. So what are force plates? Because I'm sure, I'm hoping, my athletes at my gym, the parents, and I'm hoping other parents and coaches, when they listen to this, I want to, kind of educate them real quick on what force plates are, even educate myself. So selfishly, improve my understanding of them. So what are force plates?
Yeah, man. Force plates are literally just this little platform that you stand on, right? I guess you could say you could lay down and put your hand on too, right? But typically, if you're doing an upper body test, I would say for that. But most of the time, you stand on these things. And what do they measure? They're called force plates. They measure force over time, right? And that gives us impulse. So the more force I apply, I guess you could say even over a long period of time, the bigger the impulse you have, right? Or a shorter period of time. And honestly, that's probably most ideal in an athletic situation. We want to be able to apply a ton of force very quickly. We look at those athletes as explosive or powerful. That's how we would label them, I guess, if you will, right? So that's essentially what they measure. In simplest terms, is just how much force and how much time.
Yep.
And all the metrics that we get from it, man, there's got to be 100 metrics, give or take, right? Like I've narrowed it down to certain things that I look at. But really it gives us a deeper look under the hood of the car of an athlete from like a neuromuscular standpoint, and what neuromuscular qualities do they have? What are they lacking? And then how can we take what they're lacking? Because we're all lacking something, right? Like they're using this at the professional levels, the high D1 levels. Like these guys are legit athletes, right? But they still have something that they could improve on, right? So we're taking that and saying, okay, this is what this kid is lacking in, or he's deficient in. And then this is what we're going to do in the weight room to improve that quality that he's lacking in, to improve his overall performance, right? So, we look at the counter movement jump. Literally, you drop down first before you start to come back up. That's how we create momentum, right? And you got to hit the brakes to stop yourself. Otherwise, you're going to slam into the ground, right? What is that force that you're able to apply into the ground? The greater the force, the greater the impulse, the higher the likelihood you're going to be able to jump a little bit higher and reverse that. If we were to take a step back and go to physics class, right? How fast can you hit the brakes? We call that braking RFD, or rate of force development. That's a very trainable trait, but it's also a highly desirable trait that you would want for athletics,
Sure.
right? And then again, are you weak in the braking phase, or your ability to like stop yourself? There's certain qualities that we're going to attack in the weight room if that's a deficiency of yours. Or maybe you're good at hitting the brakes, but when you get to the bottom of that squat and your jump, you're leaking force. We call that force at minimum displacement. From a metric standpoint, at least with the plates I use, we use Hawken Dynamics. I love Hawken Dynamics. Volve is another company. I'm not very familiar with them. They might call it something different, but either way, bottom of the squat, force at minimum displacement. That's that end range of motion. That's typically where a lot of injuries occur too in sport, is that end range of motion. If you can picture the bottom of a squat of a counter movement jump, it's not really that different than somebody planning on one leg to cut or something, right? So if you're leaking force there, you could see how, and it's not a always case, but you could see how that could lead to injury, right? But you could also see how maybe that athlete can't get in and out of a cut very quickly, right? And if we can improve the forces that they're able to generate and stop leaking, not leak forces there, it's going to improve their performance. It's going to set them up for a better propulsive phase when they're trying to push off the ground, right? And maybe that's some athletes that they struggle. They're good with their brakes, they're good at the bottom of that squat, but they just can't continue to push and increase forces through the propulsive phase. There's certain things that we do in the weight room, whether that's, box squats, hang cleans, squat jumps, things you and I have talked about in the past in our time together, but like those qualities or those exercises are going to help improve that quality, right? So again, to take a step back in summation, like just a simple counter movement jump allows us to take a look under the hood of an athlete. What are the deficiencies they have? We can bucket them based off those deficiencies, and we can have a very smooth flowing weight room session with 50 kids that are on their own program that they need based on what deficiencies they have to improve their performance, right? It really allows us to individualize programs. And to take it a step further, for all the parents out there and stuff, what's so great about this, and it's what's so great about what you're doing, is you're able to give kids what they need and not just throw darts at the wall and hope that it sticks for somebody, right? Because we could take 50 kids and put them all in the same program. Some are going to get better and some are going to get worse. The kids that are getting worse, they probably got worse because we weren't giving them what they were deficient in or what they needed, right? That's just one small test. We can do a strength test with these guys. We can see, instead of doing a 1-arm back squat, which you and I know could take a half hour, 45 minutes to work up to, right? Most high school kids don't have the training age appropriate to be able to do a true 1-arm back squat. And it takes forever. There's the risk of injury, where we can just do an isometric belt squat. It's a 4-second test. How much force can you produce? We're able to kind of quantify that and bucket you into, like, we could compare you to like what a Division I athlete typically is able to produce. This is where you are. How fast can you get to your peak force?
Mhm.
you know, rate of force development. And then based on that, just that test, we can come up with your dynamic strength index. And basically what that is what do you need? Do you need more max strength in your programming? Do you need more explosive strength? Do you need a little bit of both? You know, and then one last test I love too a lot is our reactive strength index, or RSI. It's called the multi-rebound test. It looks like pogo hops when you do the testing. But how reactive are you in your Achilles? How stiff are you in that ankle complex, in that Achilles complex, right? And we know that the higher the score, the stiffer you are, the faster you're going to run, the higher you're going to jump, right?
Mhm.
And then based on that data, we can bucket you into like plyometric stations that are appropriate for you. So there's a lot, man. Like as you can tell, like I could go on about this stuff all day long.
Yeah.
But it really is next level stuff to help guide our programming and help improve performance.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, I mean, I think, you know, if we peel back the onion and just go right back to square one, right? You talk about the counter movement jump. And for those of you that, you know, missed that piece, it's, you know, just going down and up and jumping. But I like how you broke it down, that there's different, you know, aspects of that movement. You know, a lot of times we just, you know, athletes, like I'm working on my vertical by doing box jumps. But right, you just said like when you go down, that's a certain mechanism. When you pause, that's a certain mechanism. Then when you redirect and go back up, again, a certain mechanism. And then you use that idea of, you know, leaking energy. And that's one thing that we see a lot with our young underdeveloped athletes, right? Their chest is really falling down. Or we get some kids, you know, I see it more with, you know, with girls, you know, they do a hinge into like kind of that swaying forward squat when they go to jump, you know. So we look at some of those positional things. And I like how you broke that down, because it gives meaning to the plyos. It gives meaning and purpose to the exercise, instead of just saying everyone's back squatting. And then you also just kind of labeled periodization, right? You can't back squat for 12 months out of the year. You can't bench press. You know, you can't do a 15, 12, 8, 6, 3, 2 pyramid when you bench press every single week, because how is that going to translate to sport performance, or, you know, physical adaptation, or, you know, losing weight, getting whatever your goal is, you know. So I think you describing the purpose of force plate testing, and even just different, you know, positions of jumping, you know, I hope it highlights to those listening and those out there that, you know, a back squat to a box is going to help in some aspect. A split squat from pins will help in some aspect. Accommodating resistance will help in some aspect, right? And sometimes no lifting is might be what an athlete needs. So we're not sitting there wasting time where everyone's going to spend 45 minutes trying to get absolute strength or hypertrophy. You know, I think, you know, when you came into my gym, you know, you kind of you woke up my brain in terms of like, oh, I thought I needed X, but you're like, no, actually you need Y, right? So that can help drive the training into a certain direction.
Absolutely. And I will say, like, I'll preface by saying this too, like strength isn't everything at a certain point, right? But up until that point, like strength is, and I believe is always going to be king, right? Like we have to get you stronger, period, right? Because every other desired quality is going to come off of that, like your rate of force development and stuff, right? If I don't have a foundation of strength, I'm not going to be able to apply any sort of force quickly into anything that's going to have any meaning to anything, right? I don't know if that makes sense right there, but you know, but at the same point too, let's say I'm up to a 350 or 400 pound back squat, you know, 2 times my body weight. Is it really beneficial to go from that 400 and take that to a 500 pound squat now at this point, right? Strength does matter, but it's not the end all be all at a certain point, right? Otherwise, all power lifters that are squatting 1,000 pounds would be the best athletes out there, right? There's more to it than just that.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, okay, let's get that foundation of strength. But to your point about like periodization and stuff, or even like what I see, and this is my biggest gripe, maybe I should keep my gripes out of a podcast, but I see all the time from parents, and I'm not trying to hate on anybody out there. I think that everyone has the best of intentions to try to help people. I don't think people get into things to try to hurt people purposely, right? But like, hey, well, we were always doing sets of 10, sets of 12. You know, when I was growing up, so that's what my athletes should be doing. That's what my kids should be doing. It's like, okay, well, that's hypertrophy, and there's definitely a time and place for it. That's ultimately what I'm trying to get to, is there's a time and place for everything. If I'm a football player, I need a little bit more hypertrophy than my volleyball girls do, right? I need a little bit more body armor. But what do we all need? We all need a foundation of strength. We all need to develop rate of force development. We need different phases of different things, right? And there's different points in the year where, hey, maybe we're just doing general strength training. If I'm a football player, starting in December, January, right? Just basics, going through general specific training. And then as we get closer to the season, we're going to really start to get into like specific, or what people will call sports specific type stuff. And that's actually where I like to get into. I like to attack weaknesses in that early off season. And then I like to take that force plate data a ton as we get closer to that season and make things very specific to what the athlete needs and what they're really good at too, right? And that's different for everybody. We're all built differently. We all need different things. And just because we're lacking in something, let's say we build that up, we may uncover something different now that we need to attack. That's what's really cool about the force plates, is it tells us where we are, gives us a game plan of where we need to go, and then we're able to track that and make any adjustments off of that as we continue to work with clients and work with people.
I mean, I think right now you're highlighting, not only is it as important to give athletes, objective measurements in the moment, but again, it's an accountability piece, because they need to be consistent, not for 12 weeks, not for 24 weeks, but again, 12 months. I had this thought based on some conversations. It's like, I have athletes that reach out, or parents, and like, I want to train in the month of July. And I'm like, cool, that's 30 days, 720 hours right there. And they're going to come 4 times in that month. And you really got to question, like, were you training beforehand? And are you going to train after? And then also, what are you doing in the middle? Because, that's not going to give you strength lifting for 30 days. That's not going to allow you to really get any type of adaptation. And, one of the reasons why I love evaluating athletes, whether it's just seeing what's on the bar every week or seeing what their vertical looks like every week or every month, it's accountability, right? Yeah. Because like you said, like, strength is king. However, eventually you get too strong, and then where do you go? But we see athletes, right? They go from 135 trap bar deadlift to a 225 in 12 weeks. And then they disappear for 6 months, and they come back to you and they're at 135 again. And they go back to
that's the biggest mistake I see people make. And when I was at the high school level, man, I used to love when opposing teams would do that, right? Because we still have this old school mentality that, like, I don't lift in season, I shouldn't do any of that stuff, right? And strength is a quality that you can hold on to for up to a month. The research says this, right? So in theory, I could build my back squat up to 400, not train my back squat for a month, come back in a month later, and I'm going to be about where I was, about 400 pounds, right?
Give or take a couple percentages,
give or take, but I'm going to be there, right? I can hold on to muscular strength for quite a while. Same thing with endurance. Speed is the only thing that, like, you need to train speed once a week, because you'll lose it after 5 to 7 days, right? So you need to hit 95% of your top speed once a week. But just, again, to take a step back, let's work through this for a second. Let's say you're an athlete that comes in and trains with you for July. We'll just say literally the month of July, right? Late June is all, kids getting out of school, whatever. So July, your biggest month, because first or second week in August, you're right back in the sports. So let's say you put on some strength in July. You stop lifting August 1. How ironic is it? Today's August 1, by the way, right? You don't do anything because you're in season. I don't want to lift in season. I don't want to be beat up and all that stuff that we've heard, right? So now here we are, September 1 comes up. You haven't trained in a month. Now we're going to start to get weaker, right? Now we're going to start to lose that strength that we had.
But you also got to talk about the volume increases on, your tissues, your tendons, everything like that.
You're getting beat up in your sport, right? And you got the demands of your sport, right? We could talk about that with the force plates too in a second, but so now all of a sudden we go from, September to October. You haven't been training for a couple months here. Now you've lost that strength. When do sectionals typically start up around here for our fall athletes?
I mean, probably August, September, October, probably like late October, early November.
Late October, yeah,
Yeah.
somewhere in there. So we're going to start sectionals. So by the way, when I'm working with my football team all throughout the fall, and we're getting stronger as the season goes on, we're getting faster as the season goes on. You stop training in August. Now all of a sudden we meet you in sectionals. You're as weak and as slow as you've ever been, and we're stronger or faster than we've ever been. We're going to smack you in the teeth. You know what I mean? And by the way, you're setting yourself up for injury and stuff. I mean, again, we talk about the game demands. I track GPS data on teams across the country, and I have one of my Texas high school football teams, they're hitting 400 to 500 yards of max velocity sprints. We could break that down even more, right? But they may only hit 50, 60, 70 yards of we're up to 22 miles an hour. But either way, these guys are cooking, right? Well, if you're not training for that and getting your body used to that stuff, that's how you pop a hamstring in season. If you're not exposing yourself to that stimulus, it's the same thing when you. I say this to people all the time. You do a counter movement jump on the force plates. When you land, some of us are landing at 5 to 6 times our body weight in forces. When you come down, just from a counter movement jump, you jump in the air. When you land, you're landing at 5 to 6 times your body weight in forces. And the analogy I use with kids is Zion Williamson 5, 6 years ago, whatever that was, when he goes up for a layup and comes down and blows out of his sneaker. So imagine those joints, those ligaments, the musculature that has not been training. And now you're in a game, in a basketball game, going into sectionals, you haven't been training, and then you're putting that kind of stress on your joints. You're not used to that. That's how you get injured.
The best ability is availability, right? I mean, naturally, if you're going to be the top player on the court, you're there. But if you're not available, you are no different than the worst player on your team. So those are those pieces. And I don't know where I was listening to, but they were talking about just, people questioning, should we be training these high velocity Hunter Eisenhower?
Eisenhower, yeah.
I listened to his podcast the other day, and the people are scared to train these high qualities because they're doing it in their sport. Well, let's be real. There's not too many times, especially in basketball, where you're hitting top end speed or you're getting to a full effort, maybe once if you can dunk, and especially in Rochester, maybe one every 3 games, you're going to get a fast break dunk, but it's that one time. Is your body prepared for that? So you better be training those qualities during practice and during the season, because you're not hitting it like you were, and you're just not going to get there. You're not getting there too often in the game. So I think there's huge value in, what you're saying and making sure you're hitting those top end speeds and those max effort outputs.
Even just the stop and go of basketball, there's a lot of, I quantify it on Catapult's one of the GPS companies I work with in track data, especially with basketball. I used to do it at Livonia with our basketball teams. We track their data in accelerations and decelerations. That's really what the sport of basketball is accelerate, decelerate, boom, 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 a lot of change of direction. And there's a lot of volume in that. I can't remember what the numbers were. I can look back on my old spreadsheets and what I have in that, but there's a lot of numbers on that stuff, right? So if you have a kid that's done nothing in the fall and they head into basketball season in week 1, you're boom, 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 changing direction, and you're not ready for that. Your tissue, your joint, you're not ready for it. That's what it's going to happen. You're going to get injured, right? So it's a year-long thing. Louis Simmons, one of the greatest minds ever, Westside Barbell. He recently passed away, and I love Louis. He came up with a conjugate method. Shouldn't say he necessarily came up with it, but he's the one that popularized it, right? He said, especially at high school, it makes total sense. It's a 4-year process. I tell the kids all the time, we're slow cooking you like a turkey, man. If I get you as a freshman, I got 4 years to develop you, and that's got to be consistent, right? And we're going to have the ups and downs.
A week for 4 years. That's like over 200 training sessions. 200. That's a lot. It's a lot of volume.
And there's there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, right? Like there's certain points in the year when I'm trying to, in the off season, I'm trying to beat you up a little bit. I got to get the body to adapt. And, am I going to see on the force plate your vertical and maybe some other qualities drop? Yes, but that's the whole point of improving. in changing, or so what we call super compensating in strength and conditioning, right? Like we stress the body, it slightly goes down for a little bit, the body adapts, changes, gets stronger, and then it returns to a level that's above what baseline was. So now we have a new baseline, and we continue to stress it that way, right? So I'm going to beat you up at certain points of the year because I'm trying to get you to super compensate.
Yeah.
But then there's other parts of the year too, where like one of the metrics we look at, it's called MRSI and the force plates. But like if I was testing you daily, and I used to do this with our kids at Livonia, we'd have them come in, we'd do a vertical jump, and we called that MRSI. Essentially, it was their readiness score. If there was any central nervous system fatigue, because stress is stress, right? Like I could go and, you play a football game, it's like a car wreck, right? Or you go play a basketball game, you're putting 3 games a week, you're putting a lot on your body. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some nervous system fatigue. And let's face it, kids aren't necessarily going through proper nutrition, hydration. They're not
summertime, they're waking up at noon. They're
waking up at noon and going to bed
8 hours. It's almost 8 hours to fuel your body and get ready for the day.
That sleep, you're not recovering, right? So like there's going to be that fatigue. And this is stuff, by the way, that like professional athletes are spending millions of dollars on, is their nutrition and their recovery. And so we got to take that into account. So to take a step back and go where I was going with that is like, okay, hey, you're not where you normally are because there's fatigue going on. We need to adjust what we're doing in the weight room today. Because as a strength coach, my job is to keep you healthy and performing at a high level if I can, right? There's certain things out of my control. But I can't look at a sport coach. I can't say to Coach Fitch, hey, like, you guys are tired today because I just 1RM back squatted them. And by the way, they haven't slept the past 5 days and their nutrition is sucked. And, that's on me. Like, I got to be smart about what I'm doing and understand when I can push and when I need to back off. And that's where those force plates, again, they can tell us what your deficiencies are, but they can really like give us some insight as to like where you're at from a recovery or readiness standpoint day to day too. And then we adjust off of it. So we can continue to improve.
It's a twofold, right? Not to interrupt, it's a twofold because we need to take pride in, utilizing our knowledge of stress and fatigue and how to back off and how to push. And even when to implement, certain exercises that will still provide some type of adaptation, even when they need to recover. But the same thing is like athletes need to come in prepared and ready to get an adaptation because we're not physical therapists. We're not orthopedics. We're not here to rebuild. We're here to advance and enhance, So those are those qualities where force plate data is amazing. Force plate testing is amazing. But, once we get information and once we apply it to our athletes, athletes, parents, whoever you're at, right, you need to make sure that you're taking pride in the other 23 hours or the other 20 hours of the day, because if you come in fatigued every day, whether we're force plate testing, whether we're power index testing, whether we're just looking at a normal questionnaire, right? If you're coming in every day fatigued or your knee's always in pain, you got to make sure that you're preparing your body before the training session if you want to see an adaptation, if you want to see braking forces improve, you want to see propulsive forces improve, so in some sense, we can pull back every time in the weight room because we can probably look at 90% of our athletes saying you're not ready to train, but athletes come to us to see improvement. They want to get faster, jump higher, be, more athletically strong, so it's that twofold, making sure outside of the gym, nutrition, sleep, all that stuff. And again, we can go down a rant on that piece too.
Oh yeah.
But
100%. That's a 2-hour podcast right there.
2 hour, man.
So
I know we got busy days, so you're coming into my gym next week. What we got on August 8th, you're going to do some force plate testing with my athletes. Where can people find you? What's a good way to get a hold of you if there's a parent or an athlete that's really interested in, getting some force plate testing, and even using some of your remote services?
Yeah. So my email is chad@smithspeedperformance. That's all one word, .com. And then I believe my Instagram, which is what I'm on all the time, at Coach Smith 0410. And then I also have my business one, which is Smith Speed Performance. So you guys can follow me on that. I have a lot of cool stuff that we're doing on there. Like I said, traveling around the country, trying to help people with this stuff and help improve athletes across the country, right? And I love to do that in my own backyard, which is upstate New York. I want to be around the area. I want to test as many athletes as I can. I want to help as many facilities like yours as I can, right? And just give you the data. Like you're qualified and trained enough to know, okay, this kid is braking deficient. You and I have talked about this stuff. You know what to do with that, right? Or this kid's propulsive deficient. You know what to do with that. But getting in there and getting the data is what's crucial, right? And it's really not for an expensive cost at all. It's very inexpensive. There's places, very few of them around the area, but there's places you can go to do it, and it's a heck of a lot more expensive than what we're charging to do that, right? So, yeah, man, you can follow me on that stuff. You can reach out to me if you want to get an individual assessment. Obviously I kick out remote programs, but at the same point too, like if they're your people, like I'm just trying to help you with that stuff, right? Yeah. And collaborate with you. That's my passion. But yeah.
Well, Chad, appreciate your time. You're a busy man. You got a lot of stuff traveling left and right. You got 2 boys at home like me, so they're probably never letting you relax when you are off the clock. So appreciate your time.
Luckily, baseball season's over, so a little bit slower. All the parents out there that have travel baseball kids, the struggle.
Yeah.
So
never stops. You got 48 hours off, and then you're back at it.
Yep.
Love it.
So
all right, Chad. Well, appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, of course, brother. We'll